दिखला दी हम आजादी के मतवाले सब मिलके कहेंगे इंडिया जा जा कश्मीर से निकल जा मेरी जन्नत मेरे घर से निकल जा इंडिया जा जा कश्मीर से.
Hello everyone, good morning and assalamu alaikum. My name is AMEER Ali and I've been invited today by Pehchan's TV platform to speak on a very sensitive issue and to ask burning questions of the day about the most sensitive region in the subcontinent. And we'll be joined by some panelists and I'll be asking some very critical questions to them. Joining us today first is Ms. Lee Rhiannon. She is a former senator from New South Wales and has been actively working for the rights of refugees and asylum seekers, and has also co-founded and directed numerous organizations and has been parts of several social justice movements. Thank you so much, Ms. Lee Rhiannon, for joining us today. Before starting off, I'd just like to ask you your thoughts on what is happening in Kashmir, the atrocities against the Muslims, the actions of the RSS, and how do you see this evolving? And what are your thoughts on the processes and the actions that are taking place in the region?
February 5 is always a very important day because it's a Kashmir Solidarity Day. And it is an opportunity for us to highlight what is happening with Kashmir. And when we're talking about Kashmir, obviously we need to talk about what is happening in India. I'm in Australia and there is some awareness that Kashmir, and there's some really difficult, challenging things under the Modi government. And I really welcome the opportunity to talk about this on International Kashmir Solidarity Day. Within Australia, it's interesting when we start talking about India, a comparison is often made with China because the way Australia handles China is so different from the way we handle India. With China, there's a whole number of issues that we take up about human rights abuses. We're very critical of their militaristic attitude to their own people. When it comes to India, the leaders of our government, the Australian government, don't take up these issues. They're really very quite sycophantic. And that's not healthy. And we're seeing this play out within Australia in some quite worrying ways. But firstly, some comments about our political leaders. Simon Birmingham, who is the Trade Minister, was in India in May last year at the time of the shocking Delhi pogroms against Muslims in Delhi. And he made the most extraordinary statement where he spoke about that what people respect about India is its approach to the rule of law. At a time when so much has been undermined within the Indian judicial system, which was once had very fine foundations, but now so many judges and the whole legal process has been compromised. So many of the laws that have been passed are discriminatory against minorities, but particularly Muslim people. So we see the Australian government there taking a very simplistic and very dangerous position in the way that they're promoting India in something that is just not the case. Then on top of that, something even a more worrying development, the High Commissioner from Australia to India, Mr. Barry O'Farrell, former Premier of New South Wales, he actually went to the headquarters of the RSS, the parent organisation of the BJP party that is well known for its links to some very oppressive tendencies. And what's very worrying is that one of their former leaders, Gulwalparkar, and I do apologise for some of my pronunciations, but that Mr. O'Farrell, the High Commissioner, was photographed in front of this and other leaders who have expressed their admiration for the rise of the fascist developments in the 1930s, and particularly some of the actions of Mussolini and Hitler. Now, this is an extraordinary in a country like Australia that prides itself to this day of being fair-going, being welcoming to people from different nations and having a rich multicultural heritage, that such a prominent diplomat, and in fact it's only been the second senior diplomat to ever go to the headquarters of the RSS, undertook this journey. Now, there is some good news that there is more awareness developing in this in Australia, because many people are worried about it. been taken up in our parliament with a round table. And the round table, one of the round tables was about is India moving towards fascism? That brought together MPs, members of parliament from Australia, Northern Americas and Europe. And that's something that we will continue. Now we're into 2021. There's been motions in Parliament urging the Australian government not to do what Minister Birmingham and the High Commissioner did, but actually to question the Indian government on what it is doing to minorities in India, and particularly with regard to human rights abuses. So it's been taken up in the parliamentary level, within the community, but what's now happened is that there have been some forums by organisations in Australia, and we have a number, like they exist in many countries, that are associated with the RSS, that are pushing a very aggressive and I would say a very dangerous narrative in terms of trying to influence Australian politics to be more supportive of the Indian outlook under the BJP party. And I think this is something that really needs to be explored, because this is very relevant to the issue of Kashmir. Kashmir has been taken over completely. It lost even its self-autonomy that it had by the Indian government. Indian-occupied Kashmir is now totally ruled from Delhi. So we need to understand how the BJP is operating, the influence of the RSS that continues today, and even a country like Australia, which people might think is a long way away. We're effectively a neighbour of India, where part of our coastline is on the Indian Ocean. We are a neighbour of India. India is a nuclear power. What goes on in India, what happens in Kashmir, is something that we need to be alert to. We need to raise awareness of the human rights abuses that are occurring for the Kashmiri people, and that means examining the BJP party, the role of Mr. Modi as Prime Minister, and what influence they're trying to exert in Australia to unfairly and I would say undemocratically change our policy.
Thank you so much for the insights, Ms. Rhiannon. These were some very important points. And just to build on that, I'd just like to ask you, how do you see the anti-hate that is being spread by RSS? How do you think Australia should tackle this situation? Because any form of hate is against the Muslims or any other community is not just an issue of the Kashmiris, but it's also a threat to the multiculturalism that is upheld by the Australian communities.
Question, we need to talk about the RSS and affiliated organisations, because they are active in Australia. They're active to infiltrate academic institutions, to influence politicians, and they're doing that in a way to promote misinformation and Islamophobia. So I think that that's what we need to understand is actually happening in Australia today. And one thing that I've only just become aware of is which I found quite extraordinary, is with the World Hindu Council, and again I apologise for my pronunciation. I've only just become aware of this with the. I've only just become aware of this, that is happening in New South Wales. There is the World Hindu Council, and again I apologise for my pronunciation, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, and it's actually been recognised by the CIA as a right-wing militant organisation. Now that organisation, the World Hindu Council, has been registered as a special religious education provider to the New South Wales Department of Education, which means that they can go into schools and be engaging with pupils. Now, I find that really wrong. And I would really urge people who are watching this, who live in Australia, to take it up with their local MP about their concerns. And surely this is something that our security organisation, ASIO, should be aware of and should be looking into, and it should not be allowed. Now, we also have there's also the impact on politicians. The RSS and its affiliated organisations are known to influence elections in host countries. They support various campaigns. And then they're often trying to influence members of parliament to be quite are either benign or directly supportive of the Modi government. Now, when you consider what the Modi government is doing when it passed citizenship laws, marriage laws, that are in fact very similar to the Nuremberg laws that became so notorious in the 1930s, this is deeply worrying. And it's why I think that we need to speak out about these developments, because within Australia, the RSS and its affiliated organisations are out there working to influence politicians in a whole range of ways. And we see this often in cultural events, but also there is then the attempt to directly influence our politics. And I think in concluding on this point is that what is needed within Australia is for these organisations to be registered as foreign agents. Now, that has happened, I understand, in the United States now with many of these organisations. In Australia, it seems that many of these Hindu organisations, that they're wonderful, colourful organisations promoting the diverse and incredible India. Now, that is really a dangerous narrative that's promoted by the BJP party to hide what they are in fact doing on the ground in India. And I'm worried now exporting to countries like Australia is very dangerous Islamophobia, which is not in keeping with the values of most Australians and our commitment to building a multicultural society.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rhiannon. These were some very important points again. And my last question to you would be on how the Pakistani Australians and the Indian Australians should shape their efforts against this issue.
I think this is a very vital question. As I've mentioned, Australia has been very proud of our approach to the development of our nation as one committed to multiculturalism, that we have people from hundreds of countries here, and we have a very rich diaspora from South Asia. But at the moment, more and more, we're becoming aware that some of the BJP organisations are attempting to bring to this country the divisions, and particularly the Islamophobia, which is targeting groups of people and groups of Australians who are Muslims. And that can spill over in so many dangerous ways. It's very divisive, it just can destroy lives, and it's something that needs to be called out and stopped. So what do we do about it? I think first off, we need to create greater awareness amongst politicians. We need to actually name these organisations that are involved. I do think that they need to be seen as agents of foreign influence. That is now possible in Australia, but I believe that none of these organisations have been listed in that way. So I think organisations that have any links with the RSS, like the Hindu Council of Australia, that is very important. And I particularly mentioned the Hindu Council of Australia on a recent webinar. Some of the discussion that occurred on that was clearly aimed at attacking Muslim people. And I actually interpreted some of the comments of inciting people to be critical, to adopt Islamophobic attitudes. And that can lead to violence, it can lead to all sorts of destructive practices. So at the moment, those comments seem to be linked to public comments on webinars and in public places. But we don't want that spilling out further. We want to control it. So that's why it needs to be taken up within Parliament. It needs to be discussed and scrutinised. We also need to be taking it up in terms of academic organisations. We need to scrutinise how these organisations work. And also, are they attempting to influence elections as well as politicians? So it is at a formative stage, but it's work that needs to be taken up in a comprehensive way. And it's why our links now with politicians and concerned members of the public in North America and Europe is very helpful, because I'm aware they're also tackling this. This is a global problem and we need to handle it in our own country and be in touch with other people so we build an inclusive world and end the Islamophobia right around this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brennan. Let's move to Anjum Rafiqi here. And Anjum Rafiqi sir, thank you so much for joining us today. Anjum Rafiqi is someone who's from Srinagar, Kashmir, and now lives in Sydney right now and has family and friends in Kashmir. And we'd love to get your insight, Anjum sir. And the first question, it's going to be, if you could please guide us about the RSF activities in Kashmir and the other regions. Uh, uh,
Sure. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for inviting me over for this get together. I'll come straight to the point with regards to the RSS activities or the Hindutva-led activities that are happening in Kashmir. It's very clear that, like the rest of India, they are trying to saffronize all of Kashmir. The terrorism basically inflicted upon the people of Kashmir by the occupation force is not a new thing. So it's not something that is suddenly come up with the rise of RSS over the last 5 years. So I need to make this clear to start with, that the rise of RSS over the last 5 to 6 years within India and their extreme ideology and their fascist ideology that's come through is in addition to what used to happen in Kashmir already. So Kashmir is a colony, and the people of Kashmir have been colonized since 1947 and times before as well. But in the modern context of India and Pakistan, let's start with 1947. The Kashmiris have not been granted or not been given their right to self-determination, and their rights have been usurped, and their expression has been stifled at all times, using laws and using policies since times immemorial, as in be it the TADA law, be it the Armed Forces Special Protection Act, be it the POTA, TADA, as in there are laws all over the place you will find in history and the Constitution of India that were passed just with the sole aim of suppressing the voice of the Kashmiri. And whenever the Kashmiris sought to engage with the Indian regime, and that's over time, it's not necessarily just with the RSS, either they tried to bribe the voice, or they tried to sabotage the voice, or in extreme cases, they have been basically incarcerated and put in jail. We have many examples in our history where our spokespeople or our mujahideen have been put behind bars, and lately, basically following 5th of August, and with the advent of the RSS-led ideology in the regime, that's BJP, they have taken a leaf from the manual from Israel, basically, to suppress the people of Kashmir, to terrorize the people of Kashmir into silence to start with, and wear them down, with the result that one day the generations will just be forced into submission. But what they forget is that with every atrocity, with every murder they commit, with every act of colonial settlers, policies that they put into place, they are making sure, inshallah, that the posterity, the generation will ensure that, inshallah, we will get our right, and that's the right to self-determination. Inshallah, that will be exercised.
Thank you so much for answering the question, Anjum Saab. Now, this shows that this threat is not just limited to the Kashmiris, but now this serves as a global threat to humans and the activities that are taking place. A follow-up on this and very important question would be, how can the Pakistani diaspora communities help the Kashmiri cause?
There are a few dimensions to this question that you pose, as in how can the first dimension is a simple question: how can the Pakistani diaspora help the Kashmiris and their movement, right? But there are some sub elements to that as well that I would like to highlight after I address the prime question. In the first instance, I would want to put it on record to start with that the people of Kashmir are grateful to the people of Pakistan and the governments of Pakistan over time for making sure that they highlight the plight of the Kashmiris and providing the moral support for our freedom struggle. The struggle is alive, alhamdulillah, partly thanks to your support. So we're grateful for that. Having said that, there is an element of Pakistani support that at times, please, don't mind me saying this, that is unwelcome support, and I'll highlight on that element more than the support that we get, that we are grateful for. There is a tendency within the Pakistani diaspora, with their passions and their feelings for the people of Kashmir, that they are quick to jump and talk for Kashmir and talk on behalf of the Kashmiris. That leads to a situation where it becomes a dialogue between India and Pakistan, Indians and Pakistanis, and the Kashmiris become bystanders. Unfortunately, that has happened over the last 73 years, and it continues to happen at times. This formula has not worked over the last 70 years. And I assure you, if we do not change this tack, with all due respect to the well-meaning Pakistanis around the world, if we do not change this tack, the response that we get from the Indians is not going to be any different. They always say, it is the Pakistanis, it is the Pakistanis, it is the Pakistanis. And we need to get away from that. It is not helping the Kashmiris every time the narrative is hijacked and made into an issue between India and Pakistan. This issue is about Kashmir. When we talk about the Kashmir issue, it is about Kashmir. So let the Kashmiris talk. Let the Kashmiris express themselves. Give them the mic. Don't speak for them. Allow them to put forth their point. And at times, there will be times when there will be probably disagreements. There will be certain issues that they might bring up that might not be always pleasant to the ears. But in the broader spectrum, I'd say, if you want to help Kashmir with its movement, the thing to do would be, say, we go to what do you call them, rallies. There's no need for Pakistani slogans over there, right? It is not about promoting Pakistan. It's about highlighting the issue of Kashmir. There's no need to bring Pakistani flags over there. It is not about Pakistan. It's about Kashmir, right? And when we talk about Kashmir, it does not help us when you, not only you, as in when anyone brings up other issues between India and Pakistan, because then the narrative gets sidelined, and we lose the main question that's being addressed at that time. There will be times to address other issues, and they have their own time and their own place. But we are basically falling into the trap of the Indian, methodology. Every time we get sidetracked, every talk about issues that really are not core to Kashmir. And the Indian media, the Indian polity is very good at dragging these conversations in that direction, because that diverts attention from the Kashmir issue. Again, it is not, while the people of Kashmir, the majority of the people of Kashmir share their religion with Pakistan, it is not a religious issue. It is a political issue. It is the right to self-determination for the people of Kashmir, and that's all Kashmiris, be it Buddhists, be it Hindu Kashmiris, the Pandits, be it the Sikhs, be it the Muslims. It's about the political rights of them, and to make it a religious issue, it does not really help the people of Kashmir. And lastly, I would say, when the diaspora, the Pakistani diaspora, talk in favor of or on behalf of Kashmir, or they extend their support, that support should not be qualified. It's not qualified support. It should be unconditional support, irrespective of where Kashmir wants to go. And this is something that has become a issue of what do you call it, divisiveness between various groups who are all fighting for the right for self-determination for the people of Kashmir. Whether Pakistan will, whether Kashmir will end up as part of Pakistan or it will stay independent, or the point right now is all focusing on, and as supporters of Kashmir, everyone should be focusing on one point, and that one point is to fight for the right to self-determination of all Kashmiris as defined by the UN regulations in 1948. Whoever that is, whichever religion, wherever they live, we have to fight for the right to self-determination. And what the options, the shape that the options may take place, or the outcome of such a referendum in the future, that is something to determine. And there will be a time to argue the options and argue the pluses and minuses of various options. There will be time for that as well. But right now, we should all be focusing just on one thing, and that is to make sure that the Kashmiris get their right to self-determination.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Anjum, for the insight. Another question from my side would be if you could share some insight on the current activities of RSS in the region.
I can just highlight to start with a very recent seminar or webinar that they conducted, which was a very, very Islamophobic webinar more than anything else. And this is something that RSS and their supporters are very good at. The thing is, I'll talk in broader terms with regards to India, the Indian minorities and RSS. They're very happy. The Indian diaspora is very happy, especially the supporters of RSS, are very happy to thrive and use the plurality that the West offers them. And they make use of it, and they enjoy it. And like every other resident in the West, be it US, be it Australia, be it Canada, be it UK, and they're very good at making sure that they get their rights, and they should, no doubt about it. But it's interesting that the same people celebrate the usurping of the rights of the minorities in India. The same people are very quick to celebrate the lynching, mob lynching in India. They're very quick to celebrate when a mosque is desecrated anywhere in the world, or when for example, the 5th of August 2019, the Black Day in Kashmir, yet another Black Day in Kashmir. They were out celebrating, and in 2020, August 5th, 2020, they put up a screen in one of the two of the council areas, promoting the celebration of the anniversary, which very cunningly the Indian government covered up with celebration of the another Black Day in Indian history. That is the razing to the ground of the Babri Masjid, and their celebration of laying the foundation stone there. So what's interesting is they will reach out to Islamophobes from within the so-called Muslim community. For example, recently they invited the notorious Tariq Fatah to the conference. So what do you really want? What are you trying to project by bringing Islamophobes on a webinar or a seminar? All you're doing is you're pandering to the extremist ideology that is happening within India, and the organization that organized it in Australia is the Hindu Council of Australia. What is interesting for me, from my perspective, is not the people, the extremists who were speaking from overseas. What was really interesting for me, and this is something that should be alarming for the Department of Home Affairs within Australia, is the 115 or 150 odd people who attended this webinar from Australia and posted comments in support of what was being said there. What is really worrying from an Australian perspective is I did not see even one voice or one comment in that webinar that would have raised a concern at the extremism that was being propagated in there. when they call every minority area or Muslim colony within India is a mini Kashmir and we need to clean it. That tells you a lot about how what their thought process is. So while they tend to paint all the Muslims with the same brush, be it from Kashmir or from the rest of India, their plans are very, very clear. And the West, unfortunately, the Western countries are yet to wake up to this unfolding catastrophe. And unless the West wakes up, unless Australia wakes up, the Australian government wakes up, the Home Affairs wakes up to this unfolding threat, soon we will have chaos between communities in here as well. Here, there are quite a few groups who have been working towards cohesion between the Indian and the Pakistan, basically the whole subcontinental communities. And these people have taken it upon themselves to berate these people who promote, peace and harmony. They take it upon themselves to call them names and troll them and basically tell them off. One of the panelists here, he has been subject to all sorts of trolls and all sorts of threats by these Hindutva people. So this is a common thing. Unfortunately, this is like the what do you call it, a third arm or fourth arm of RAW that has become, whether it is hired by the Indian regime or not is a different story. I have no knowledge about that, but they're definitely acting like the fourth arm of the RSS ideology, spreading their extreme views over here and trying to sow discord between the various members of the subcontinental community, which is really sad.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anjum, for the insight on this. We'll now move to the next panelist, Dr. Mujahid. Dr. Mujahid is a physician by profession from the Indian-occupied Kashmir. He has been an eloquent voice for the Kashmiris in the medical circle and also been chairing a lot of different think tanks and organizations who've been working on the issue of Kashmir. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Mujahid. My question to you would be, can you please share the recent developments and updates from Kashmir with us?
Thank you for taking me on the show today. And I would like to extend a few realities that are actually on the ground and taking place. You need to understand that the Indian administered Kashmir, or preferentially as we term it, the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, was a heaven. It was a heaven for anybody who would visit it. But now it's actually a composition of hatred and pools of blood. As far as the human rights aspects is concerned, in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, we need to assess and we need to ascertain ourselves that it's not just a military occupation that's going on over there. When we talk about human rights, we actually talk about the people over there, the education system over there, the culture over there, the way people actually want to express themselves. Anything, everything is being oppressed. The Indian occupation has actually been so brute upon the people that anybody who wishes to express his own views, and particularly those views that may be dissenting to the political or to what the government has to say over there. If you're a WhatsApp admin, let's suppose, you're taken, you're arrested because in your group something against India was spoken about, something that actually exhibited and exposed the human rights violations, the organized war crimes that are taking place in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir and are being committed by the Indian forces. What we must understand today is that whatever is happening in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir dates back to at least 1947. That was the day when the Indian forces landed in Srinagar. And they not only landed in Srinagar, they actually spread themselves in the whole of the valley, in the whole state of Jammu and Kashmir. And even if we take the United Nations resolutions about it, that is what makes the Indian occupied Kashmir an international something that is still there in the United Nations. And United Nations has passed almost 18 to 22 resolutions vis-a-vis Kashmir. We must understand that today the so-called security forces by India posted in the whole valley and in Jammu as well, in Ladakh, they are not security forces. They are actually terrorist forces. From the cases, the cordon of and search operations that are being carried out on peaceful people living over there, to the beating of young people, to the beating of youth and students living at homes, and then they're asked to come out at night and they're asked to lie down on the cold roads, particularly in this winter, the snowy season that we have. And then there are fake encounters. There are people, laborers, who go out of the cities and try to earn their livelihood because of this COVID lockdown and everything, because of the economic collapse, and they're labeled or dubbed as terrorists and simply shot down. Then we have multiple human rights violations in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir that need to be highlighted on an international forum, and that includes the children, the pellet victims as well, the women who have been incarcerated. Our Kashmiri women have been incarcerated for no reason other than just expressing their political views. And this is essentially curbing the right of freedom of speech. And particularly on women, I would name one of the most important social reformists of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Asian Rabi Sahiba and Fahmida Sufi and Nahida Nasreen. They were actually not only arrested, incarcerated in the Srinagar Central Jail, but were then transferred to the New Delhi Tihar Jail, one of the most notorious jails ever known to the Kashmiris. So the human rights violations, and particularly the current status, the current condition in the Jammu and Kashmir is so grotesque that the international world, that the people who actually hold the beacon of free voices, who actually claim themselves to be the speakers, the holders and guiding principles of this freedom of speech, need to come forward and they need to talk about Kashmir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mujahid, for the answer and some very useful points and the updates from the region. The next question is going to be, how do you think that the RSS ideologies are pushing their agenda in Kashmir?
See, that's an excellent question once again. What we need to understand is that the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir has always had a communal harmony. Back in 1947, when India butchered more than 200,000 Muslims in Jammu, not a single eye flinched in Srinagar. Not a single Kashmiri Pandit was harmed even at that time. Even when in 1990s, when an element of armed resistance entered into the freedom struggle of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, we must understand that the Kashmiri Pandits, or the minorities for that sake, living in Indian occupied Kashmir were never harmed. But today, what we see is that the Indian chief ministers, they try to fetish the Kashmiri girls, and after the removal of Article 35A and 370, every RSS goon is like dreaming of Kashmiri girls and they wish to marry them. I mean, this objectifying of a lady, objectification of girls, particularly of Kashmiri girls, and that too Kashmiri Muslim girls, needs to be taken really seriously, because this is not just words, this is going to happen. And the demographic changes that are actually taking place in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, particularly with the settlement of the RSS goons in the Indian occupied Jammu Kashmir, and of course the issuance of the legal papers domicile for this matter is being expedited, so that the people, the actual stakeholders living in that valley, turn into a minority, and the people shifting or transferring themselves from the mainland India come into Kashmir, into Jammu and Kashmir, and are thenceforth named and labeled as Kashmiris. What we need to understand and highlight at this time is that every government from US to Australia need to talk about this, because back in 1947 till 1957, over those 10 years, United Nations had actually passed a resolution that a demographic change cannot take place in the disputed territory of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and that is what India is doing at this point in time. We must understand that even the law frameworks, the Indian Penal Code that is enacted in the mainland India, they cannot use it in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir has its own lawfare. Jammu and Kashmir has its own judiciary. And this is the more important thing that dates back even before 1947. But RSS, with its own mindset, with its own religious narrowing eye vision, where it considers that Muslims, particularly of the Jammu and Kashmir, are nothing but terrorists, labeling an indigenous laborer, labeling a student aged 14 years, and then just simply telling everybody that they were terrorists and that is why they were shot without any trial. Extrajudicial killings have become a norm in Jammu and Kashmir. So what these days, what the problem we have and we are facing is that RSS mindset, the Hindutva mindset, is disturbing not only the communal harmony in Jammu and Kashmir, but it is also trying to belittle the Kashmiri Muslims living over there. And this particular fact has been mentioned in one of the documents by the UNGA back in 2018. So the world knows about this. The world has an idea of the current circumstances in Jammu and Kashmir, and international media has been speaking about it. But the major problem is action. The major element is the BDS that should have taken place, the boycott, divestment and sanction of the Indian government, of the Indian authorities, by actually pressurizing them that even if India may be a bigger market, human rights are much bigger. Human rights are much above the states, much above the religion. This is, I believe, the take-home message for anyone, for any authority, be it the Australian authorities, be it the people who actually claim and actually consider themselves to the beacons of free voices and human rights. This is the time, this is the place. You have to talk about Kashmir, you have to talk about the illegality and the oppression and occupation that is currently being taken place at the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Thank you, Dr. Mujahid Saab, for your time and for answering these questions and sharing some useful insights. We'll now move to the next panelist, who is Raja Faisal Saab. He has joined us from Islamabad. He's a journalist and has worked closely in the region and has been reporting that. Raja Faisal Saab, thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk about the Pakistani side on the issue. And the first question that I'd like to ask you is going to be, what is the latest line for thinking in Pakistan, and how's the vision of the government is on the Kashmir issue?
Well, Pakistan's stance on Kashmir is unwavering since 1947 because Pakistan considers Kashmir as its, a part which can never be denied, and this is a stance of Pakistan since 1947. And yes, of course, the world knows that the basic bone of contention between both of the countries equipped with the nukes. When I say equipped with the nukes, of course, I mean Pakistan and India. The bone of contention is Kashmir, and which is a business that needs to be settled. Since 1947, United Nations, it did offer that if both of the countries that can pull out the forces from Kashmir, it can be resolved. And of course, it's just the you do it first and you do it first thing. So Pakistan's stance has been this and would remain this, that Pakistan will always consider Kashmir as its part, and Indian occupied Kashmir recently has been changed into Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and which is the latest from Kashmir, and that did happen after August 2019 when illegally India illegally abrogated Article 370 and 35A, which enables rest of the Indians to come into Jammu and Kashmir, Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and uh, make their houses, live there, and make it feel like it's India. But it's not India, it is Kashmir, which is part of Pakistan. And even today, the youngest generations, the generation we are talking about, that was born in 21st century, and after so long, the generation which was born in 21st century, seeking justice, seeking freedom. That means no matter if it is 100 years or 200 years or whatever the time has passed, the situation would remain in Kashmir as it is, because it's freedom they seek. It's Pakistan they seek since 1947. So India, no matter how hard it tries to occupy Kashmir, they can never occupy the hearts of Kashmiris. And any place is not known for piece of land. It's known for people. It's people, what they think of, what they think about. And if we talk about the people of Kashmir, either they want to be free or they want to be with Pakistan, free with Pakistan. So that is what the situation is, the current situation of Kashmir. And of course, Pakistan's stance has always been um, this, that Pakistan claims Kashmir as it is, as having it as is part. And Kashmir, of course, is seeking justice, is seeking freedom from illegal occupation of the Indians. And India continuously enforces uh, the Kashmiris and Kashmir with their hegemonic design. And everyone knows that nearly 6 lakh active troops of Indian Army, they are in Jammu and Kashmir, and it is considered as the most militarized zone of the world, and world recognizes it as it is. And in the current scenario, Pakistan you know, has loudly and clearly spoken over it, and the world is shouting out loud as well, related to the Indian illegal hegemonic design, which is active in Kashmir right now.
Thank you, Raja Faisal. Just building on the points that you shared, and you also mentioned the international community. How do you think we can further garner support from the international community on this issue?
To me, world has progressed very slowly towards this, and the pace is very slow, and one can only imagine and can predict that the reason behind it would be that India is has always been considered as a big market for different countries, so that they want to have good relations with India on the basis of economic terms, because it's a huge market. It's nearly 1/6 of the world. So whenever the world would be, looking towards India, it would not be looking towards it whether they are, infringing some sort of human rights, or they are not following the international law, Geneva Conventions, or they are not following what United Nations is telling them to follow. They would entirely be looking at India as a big market for their products and for their economic endeavors. So I believe in the current scenario, the way Kashmir is dealt by the world powers. That is sad. Plus, it can be sad that it's quite shameful on part of the bigger powers of the world, powers which I'm talking about, that are the Western powers. The Western powers, they really need to think about it, that people of Kashmir, they have been seeking justice for more than 70 years. For more than 70 years, they have been bearing the carnage of the Indians. And I think it is time for the world to pace up. And if we look at how they can go along with the things, I think the best solution, which in recent past was considered as a viable solution, was Vajpayee Musharraf solution. And I think world needs to reactivate it once again. But in current scenario, with Modi in the power, and with BJP in the power, and BJP, everyone knows, is the political offshoot of RSS, and RSS didn't just emerge in few days. It has been there since nearly a century. So since last century, they've been activated within the India, and one must think about it, that how it emerged as a religious power, or I must say communal power in India. That was that they got impressed by Nazis of the Germany, and Nazi in the Nazi Germany, the designs which were followed by the Nazi Germany, how they dealt with their other countrymen having different religions, especially Jewish, the way Jews were treated at the hands of Nazis, I think it was unprecedented, and it is part of our recent ugly history. And we must never forget that whatever uh, happened in Nazi Germany must not be repeated elsewhere in the world. And right now, whatever is going on in India, forget about Kashmir, forget about Muslims, talk about Sikhs, talk about Christians, talk about, okay, don't talk about Christians or Sikhs, talk about their fellow Hindu followers. I'm talking about Dalits. Although Dalits, they are considered as the lowest caste of Hinduism, but still they are classed as Hindus. When they are born, they are written as Hindus. So, if they are not safe at the hands of Hindutva, when I say Hindutva, I don't mean that common Hindus. There are Hindus who are a very good friend of mine as well. But of course, we are talking about the fascist Hindutva ideology, which is sort of like in recent past, like we used to say that extremism within Islam is the similar way we have extremism within Hinduism. So, extremist thought within Hinduism, it must be condemned. And about Kashmir, if world is really positive about having a resolution to the problem of Kashmir, then of course they have to pressurize India. Without pressurizing India, it can't be resolved. And the only way they can do it is that they have to push away their economic endeavors, and they have to be rational enough. And once they would be rational enough, of course they can think positive about it, and they can think about the people of Kashmir rather than thinking about their economy or their anything else. So the dire need which is required by people of Kashmir right now is, of course, they want freedom, and it must be brought sooner rather later, because uh, already thousands of people, they have lost their lives while seeking justice in Kashmir. So I always say that sooner rather later it must be resolved.
Thank you so much, Mr. Raja Faisal, for your insights. We'll now move to the final panelist who has joined us today. His name is Gursharan Singh. Gursharan Singh is a human rights activist and migration agent based in Sydney. And Gursharan Singh, thank you so much for joining us today. And now that we've understood some of the points raised by the other panelists about how this is a human rights issue, we'd also like to hear from you about how the RSS activities in India are impacting the Sikh community, and how do you see that evolving in the future?
Thank you, Amir. Thanks for having me on the show. RSS, there is, if you have to look at RSS ideology, I will compare it with the British thing. British are known that they divided Indians among Hindus and Muslims. Just two divisions. RSS divided people in 6,000 castes, so that they are always fighting, and they can be controlled. RSS ideology is based on Manusmriti, which says that Brahmins are superior to the other human beings. This division led to fights between various groups, and Brahmins were able to control, even though they were just 3% of the total population of India. RSS got so many other organizations. BJP is also part of RSS. Modi is basically running India based on RSS ideology. And as a result, they want to make it a Hindu nation. Every segment of society, it's not just Sikhs, it's not just Muslims, it's not just Christians, it's lower caste Hindus as well. SC and ST communities are also suffering. Good thing is, now people have started to realize what they are doing, and the evidence we have seen that in 2020 Delhi genocide of Muslims, SC and ST community people cordoned off the school where the Muslim kids were studying, and they saved them all. As a result of RSS ideology and the funding which they do in various other countries to spread hate, including Australia as well. I would say that RSS guys are active here in Australia as well these days, and I guess all the funding is coming in Australia as well, coming from Indian government as well. India is burning. People are desperate for jobs. There is a lot of desperation and frustration on the ground. As a result, India will break into pieces. I hope Australian government will wake up now and tackle this hate they are creating in the society. Australia is based on justice, freedom, brotherhood, equality. See, why we guys have so many complaints against Indian government, and I'm here for the last 21 years. I never had any complaint against Australian government because judiciary works here. They deliver justice, they deliver freedom, they deliver equality. I got nothing to fear against Australian government, and I have seen that people, almost everyone, whosoever I spoke to, they say when we come back, to Australia, we sit in the aircraft and we have sign of relief. Oh, thank God, everything went well. No trouble this time. This is a clear sign of suppressive regime. Genocide is currently happening at a very large scale in Indian occupied Kashmir, and we just know even tip of iceberg. People shouldn't be subjected to the kind of treatment they are getting in Kashmir. Look at the Kisans. Kisans are on the roads. They belong to every state. They are united. I hope entire India unites against this fascist RSS Modi government and throw them out, and India have a brighter, nice future. Shame on fascist RSS government of India. It's 2 years since they started genocide in Kashmir, and they are killing people in fake encounters, and they are giving awards to people on 26th of January for killing innocents. Shame on them. Rest of the world, even though they did something to raise the voice, I think they have to do more to free Kashmir from this genocide from Indian fascist government. People of Kashmir has to unite like the farmers of rest of the country and put up a strong resistance against this criminal Indian government. You will get freedom soon. Don't be disheartened. Rest of the world is with you, and we are trying our best to get you freedom which you so strongly deserve.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. With this, we come to an end to this event. I really hope, and we all hope, that your voices are heard at the global level, because this is not just an issue for Kashmir. This is not just for the people living in Kashmir, but this is a global human rights issue which needs serious attention. Thank you all for joining us today at the Pehchan TV platform. We hope you liked it. We hope you liked the discussion, and do share your thoughts. And we hope to see you soon with another episode of Pehchan's TV. Everyone, please do share if you like the video, and do share it with your colleagues. And if you liked it, do share your comments as well in the comment section to tell us how you'd like us to present new topics in the coming future, and what are the most important things that you think we should discuss with our panelists. Thank you.